In 1985, while the internet was still a military defense strategy, Leo launched one of the earliest BBS's, bulletin board systems, a text-only precursor to the modern-day blog dedicated to all things Mac. But there wasn't an easy way to make a living with online content, at least not yet. So Leo stayed involved in more traditional broadcasting. In the early 1990s, Leo's computer show was a regular fixture on KGO and KSFO radio here in San Francisco, and later on television on PBS, CNBC, MSNBC, and Tech TV, among others. The internet, of course, changed everything, and when Apple made podcasting a verb and a mini-industry, Leo honed in with a passion, although he preferred to call it netcasting, which he found more of an apt and an accurate term of what he was doing. Leo now owns and operates Twit TV, an online network of video and audio programs covering the tech world from top to bottom, and also the live streaming video version called Twit Live. Leo's flagship podcast, This Week in Tech, or Twit, is downloaded by some 175,000 unique listeners each week. Unlike the fast-paced, breathless tech world that it covers, Twit is a relatively long show that delivers a good bit of news, views, and general information from Leo and his guests. As a host, Leo is smart, thoughtful, fiercely independent, and generally amiable. That is, the occasional outburst against Michael Arrington and the sharp questioning of David Pogue notwithstanding. In a few days, Leo is traveling to Dubai, flying 18 hours in each direction for an 18-minute presentation. We are hugely lucky to have him with us here today for a little bit longer. Please welcome Leo Laporte.
Thank you, Catherine. And thanks to the ONA board for inviting me. Thank you. It's really great to be here. It's great to talk to journalists. I would hesitate to characterize myself as a journalist. David Pogue told me he wasn't a journalist, so if he's not a journalist, I don't know what I am. He writes for the august New York Times. I'm just a podcaster. But I have been doing this quite a while. I started in radio in 1976, and I kind of sit astride the new media and the old media. Sometimes I feel like I'm standing on a dock with one leg on the dock, that's the old media, and then the ship's slowly sailing in the other direction, and my legs are going in opposite directions. But I think I'm going to be able to hop on the boat before the ship sets sail. I'm very excited about what the new media is bringing us, and I know you are. I know that's why you're members of the ONA. My original speech was going to be called New Media Rules, How Years of Failure in the Old Media Prepared Me for Overnight Success in the New Media. But then they told me I only had half an hour, and that's really not enough time to tell you all my failures in old media, so I'm just going to have to skim through those. I'll talk a little, I'll give you some war stories. The young people will please forgive me for those. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing in new media, because I'm very excited about that, and I think I've been very fortunate in being able to find some success there and have some sense of what new media is doing to change our business. And then I hope maybe at the end I can talk a little bit about money. I was a little afraid of talking about money to journalists, but then I found out that that's all you really care about. So I'll talk about monetization strategies a little bit as well. And I hope in the process I can answer the kind of the age-old question that old media types like me ask when faced with this onslaught of new media. What the fuck? So, pardon the expression, but I think it's pretty accurate, isn't it? So I started, as I said, in college radio 33 years ago now, and I did something called Rip and Read News. Was my tryout, my broadcast. I bet you, does anybody even know what Rip and Read News? All right, good. We have old farts here. Just for you young people, so you understand how far we've come. In the old days before the internet, the way you got news was you had a teletype or two or three in a closet that they had to be in the closet because they went boom, 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 as they printed out news on these, endless rolls of really cheap paper. I mean, they were such cheap paper, there were little bits of wood floating in it as it would go by, and the ribbon was very faint, and the letters were all crazy, whopper-jawed, and they'd miss letters, but that was the news, and you'd rip it, you'd take a ruler to it and rip it off, and you get this long, curly scroll of news, and then you'd go through it with a really soft, I don't know why, but every newsroom I ever worked in, you had these really like number 5 pencils. They were really soft, and no eraser, because you never look back. You only look forward, and you'd circle what you're going to write, and then you'd go into the booth as the news intro is fading. You'd run into the booth and you'd read the news from these scrolls of paper, and that's really what I was. I wasn't a journalist. I was a news reader. And really, that's what broadcasting is. I don't care if you're Katie Couric or you're Leo Laporte. You're a news reader, right? We're not journalists. We just, thank you. Now I'm really pandering, aren't I? We've come a long way. So I learned my first lesson in broadcasting was that when I went out into the real world, college experience is not experience at all. So I had to start all over again. I picked the cheesiest, cheapest, sleaziest radio station I could find, which turned out to be in an old brothel on Cannery Row in Monterey. And actually, I knew it was a brothel because it had lots of little rooms everywhere. And that's where we put the teletypes. That was a perfect place for them, and the rolls of paper. And I worked there for a while. My first job was, well, you couldn't even really call it a job, an on-air job. I started at midnight on Sunday and went to 6 a.m. Sunday morning playing reel-to-reel tapes of religious services, and then my reward was 5 to 6 a.m. I got to be on the air and play a record or something. And my second great lesson was one night about probably 3 a.m. I just lay down on the floor to just close my eyes for a minute, and woke up and I heard the tape. That's something else you probably don't, you young people never heard of, but we had things called reel-to-reel tape recorders, and the tape was going psh, 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 psh. We'd been off the air for I don't know how long. But the real lesson was the phones weren't lit up, nobody called, nobody was listening. I was, this is hell, right? Sixth circle of hell. I'm playing tapes I don't want to hear, nobody else apparently wants to hear. Welcome to broadcasting. Ta-da! Fortunately, I transcended those days and, as you do, worked my way up through the ranks from Monterey, then to San Jose. I got to San Jose in the late 70s, about 76, 77, when the tech industry was starting to explode. And that was a really exciting place to be. If you can be somewhere where something's really happening, San Francisco's like that right now, actually, where there's just a bunch of really smart people doing something very new and very exciting. There's just a buzz in the air. And it was like that in San Jose in the 70s. Apple was coming out. I remember seeing the first Lisa in the computer store window, and it's $10,000, and I was just drooling at it on my $700 a month salary. I wasn't going to be buying that anytime soon. But I fell in love with computers then. And so I had really 2 careers. This is another great lesson that I've learned. It's always good to have a plan B and C and D. If you're in the press, it's a good idea to have as many plans as you possibly can. So my second career, it was really an avocation at the time, was technology, and I started writing software for computers. I started writing software for the radio station, and because this stuff was so expensive, I started writing for magazines as a way to, fund my habit. They'd give you free software, and you'd write an article for Byte, InfoWorld, and so I was doing that kind of side by side until I got to San Francisco. I was a midday talk show host. Malcolm Gladwell, as you well know, says it takes 10,000 hours to become good at anything. I always thought I was a late bloomer because I really sucked for at least 10 years. Until I read that and I realized, it took me 10 years to get I was doing 1,000 hours a year. It took me 10 years to get good at my profession. I wasn't a late bloomer, I was just normal, so that was a relief. I've been doing it for 30 years and I still suck sometimes, but maybe I am a late bloomer. The San Francisco station I came to, I was doing interviews, starting to move away from being a disc jockey. That was a valuable lesson. The first station I went to in San Francisco, the slogan was light rock, less talk. And I was the talk. So I saw the writing on the wall. They weren't selling me, right? In fact, it really was the writing on the wall for music radio. They were selling the music. That was kind of a mistake, wasn't it? Because as soon as somebody got an iPod, they really didn't even need the radio station. They could do that all themselves. Fortunately, I must have somehow internalized that because I started moving to talk radio. And that has been a really valuable school for me in broadcasting, because talk radio is very much like what we do now online with interactivity. You're very aware of the community. You're talking to the community. It's very intimate. You have a direct connection to your audience. And so it was a hugely valuable thing for me to do. I got a lot of interviews. I still wasn't very good at it. My ratings weren't very good. And one day in 1990, the program director called me in and said, there's this new guy. His name is Rush Limbaugh, and we think he's going to be very big, so we're firing you. And I and 550 other midday talk show hosts got that message right about the same time all across the country. And you know, they were right. Rush was huge. He was much bigger than I was. But I was fortunate. They liked me. They said, but here's what you're going to do. You're going to do the weekends. You're going to do 8 hours on Saturday and 8 hours on Sunday. And this is where I learned that I can talk for 8 hours at a time, which is not a bad skill to have. And they said, and you're going to do a home improvement show. You're going to do we'll get you an expert in each one of these, a car show, a food show, a wine show. And I said, well, there's this guy I've been doing on my old radio show named John C. Dvorak. And we talk about computers. Could I please do that? And they said, no one wants to know about computers. This is 1990. No one cares about computers. I said, well, you know, I'd love to do these other things, just 2 hours. So I don't know why, but they let me and John do 2 hours of computer talk on the radio in 1990, which was, I mean, really early days. Windows 3.0, you know, DOS 3.3. I mean, it was pretty primitive. But it was very exciting for me because it's the first time I was able to merge my vocation of radio, of broadcasting, with my avocation, which is technology. And I'll tell you what, it was a good move for me. That was another lesson I learned. I was fairly mediocre. You know, when you're competing in a general industry, you have to be a superlative person to do well when there's thousands of other people trying to do what you do. But when you're the only person who understands a niche and is good at that niche and has a passion for that niche, it's a lot easier to succeed. So John and I did that show for some time. John was very gracious because he was the established name, but he kind of included me and let me talk and let me kind of make a name for myself as a tech journalist. So I was able to kind of build that up. We syndicated the show, and it didn't do very well. John left. Eventually I got a job with a little company that was just starting out in New York City. There was only 3 of them, and they wanted to do a 24-hour tech channel. They wanted to call it CNET, the computer network. And they came out and they said, you're the only guy in the country doing this. We need you, obviously. Find out how much it would cost to start a cable channel on technology. So I did my due diligence, and I came back to them and I said, well, it's about $50 million a year, and you will lose money for the first 5 years. It took 10 years for CNN to make money. So you're talking $250 million to $500 million. And they said, well, maybe we'll do a website instead. Thanks, Leo. See you later. So I went to another company, the big publishing company at the time, Ziff Davis, and we started a TV show for CNBC. Did that for a few months, canceled. This begins a long line of cancellations in my life. You don't get fired. I love in broadcasting you get fired, you get canceled, so it's not so bad. And I got, but I stayed with Ziff Davis developing programs. In 1993, I think, NBC called and said, Microsoft wants to invest. We want to start a cable network together with the really ugly name of MSNBC. And we think, well, Microsoft's going to want us to do a tech show. You're the tech publishing leaders. Would you do a show? So we developed a show for them, a 90-page treatment. I remember it was like a Seinfeld episode, going up in Rockefeller Center. And the news director at the time, Andy Lack, comes in a 3-piece suit with cowboy boots on. This is where I learned how to dress, by the way. And he puts his cowboy boots up on the table and says, what do you got? In my memory, he has a cigar, but I don't know if that's actually the case, but it was pretty much like that. And we pitched a show we called The Site. This is the one and only idea for a show I've ever had, and I've been pitching it ever since. The idea was a Victorian that's laden with technology. So you get the old and the new. It's kind of cool, but it's also, familiar. And in this Victorian laden with technology, you have these young, interesting people, many different archetypes, working on a website. And the TV show is about them. It's about the site, but you also learn about technology because they're covering technology. And we actually did the show. It was called The Site. By the time the network got a hold of it, it wasn't quite the same thing I imagined. They had Soledad O'Brien, who was their up-and-coming person anchoring it. And they had promised me a great job as the chief correspondent for this. And I was pretty excited. I thought, this is great. MSNBC, we're going to launch a new show. And then the executive producer, whose name was David Borman, he's around still. He's doing some pretty great things. David Borman came to me and said, well, I've talked to the executives at NBC, and I mentioned that you were going to be the chief correspondent, and they had one word. I swear to God, this is what he said. The word is bleh. And my face kind of falls and said, oh, well, what does that mean? He says, well, we've got a great role for you. You're going to play a virtual reality character so they don't ever have to see you. So this is when I learned that the networks really don't like technology. They love Flash, they love a 3D holographic correspondent, but don't actually say anything like Java, or they go, oh, the public's not ready for that. So they dressed me up in a cartoon suit. I had a $1 million computer, a Silicon Graphics Onyx, and I had sensors all over my body. I even had puppeteers because the technology wasn't sophisticated enough for me to move my lips. So they had puppeteers lip syncing. As I was talking, they were going like this. And then there was another puppeteer who did my hair. So my hair could grow and spin and stuff like that. But then my body and my voice was me. So I'm going like this. Soledad sitting at an espresso bar, because I, of course, was a hip San Francisco barista, a 3D virtual hip San Francisco barista. So she's sitting at a espresso bar looking at a red dot painted on the wall because there's nobody there. I'm in the other room surrounded by blankets so that they don't hear me going, ah, Soledad! And so that was the character I played. It was called Dev Null, and I did it for a year and a half, and I won an Emmy Award for it. Well, don't get too excited because the category was specialty acts, and there was only one other nominee, and it was literally a sock puppet. But I got the statue, baby. So, and I try not to tell people where that statue comes from. So another lesson learned, you never know, right? The site was canceled. Princess Diana got in a horrific crash and died, and MSNBC realized there was a lot more money to be made in covering the death of a princess than there was covering technology, which actually confirmed everything they believed about technology. They killed the show immediately. Ziff Davis did not learn from this and decided, we're going to do a 24-hour channel. This was such a flop, let's do it 24/7. And they launched something they called ZDTV, which was really difficult to explain to people because you'd call them up and they say, is this the pasta channel? What is ZDTV? You think I'm joking, I'm not. So we'd say, no, but it's like the Food Network for geeks. And that really went over well too. And already from day one, I'm thinking, what are we doing? We're building a brick and mortar business in a world that's going virtual. We're building an old school cable television network, and everything's going to the internet. This was 1998 when we launched it. And in fact, it's true because the number that I quoted, $50 million a year to start a cable channel, that's actually conservative. We were spending $100 million a year. Fortunately, it was Paul Allen's money, so I think he found that in the cushions of his sofa. But it was a lot of money, and there's a lot of pressure when you're doing that to generate that kind of income in advertising. So what happened? Well, of course, we stopped covering technology and started making it broader and broader and broader. And pretty soon the show was about Kenny Rogers, what's on Kenny Rogers' iPod. And nobody wants to watch that. Kenny Rogers fans don't care about it, and tech enthusiasts don't care about it. We actually created a channel nobody wanted to watch, which the networks are really good at. So I'm watching tech TV, but I'm also watching something else interesting happen, which is there is an audience. It's a smaller audience, but it's a very devoted audience. It's a niche audience. And this audience loved tech TV. They loved it. I was doing 2 live shows a day. They came to, they're trying to keep costs down. They said, how many hours a day can you do? How cheaply? And I said, well, I could talk for 8 hours a day. I used to do that on radio. And they said, well, we'll give you 2, but then we'll repeat it. So I was doing 8 hours a day on tech TV. I was 1/3 of the network answering computer calls, like the same thing as I did and still do on the radio, except that we had pictures and Kenny Rogers' iPod. The network did well in one respect because we got in 41 million households, but we never had a very big audience. Except that audience, those people loved it. I would go on the road, we'd make appearances. I remember going to St. Louis to a CompUSA in St. Louis and signing autographs for 6 hours. In fact, so long that they'd only rented the tent for 4 hours. So after 4 hours, they came, they got the tent, we're still signing. They got the table, we're still signing. They got the chairs, we're standing up, we're still signing. Because we wouldn't leave till we met everybody. And something clicked. I said, you know, this is a good audience. Maybe it's not an audience that's going to generate $100 million a year in revenue, but this is a devoted, active audience. The other thing I learned, I tried to explain this to the management at Tech TV. And I went into an executive meeting. They invited me to talk to them. And as typical, whenever I talk to executives, they don't really want to hear the bad news that their business is dying. They want to know what the latest gadget is. What's the cool cell phone? So they invited me in. They said, bring some gadgets, show us some gadgets. Instead, I did a whole presentation on why they were dumb and wrong, and they should aim at, it didn't go over too well, they should aim at this geek audience that loves us. I said, there's 14 million computer programmers in the US. You get 10%, you have a profitable network. And this was a good lesson. The CEO said, Leo, I'm going to tell you something I've learned in the years. He says, brand is the refuge of the ignorant. Executives, I just hate them. Anyway, so I'm thinking, what do you mean? He said, well, let me explain this, Leo. He said, advertisers don't believe it's worth advertising to smart people because they pay no attention to brand. Smart people make an actual choice. They can't be tricked or convinced. They research. So we can't sell ads to a network for smart people. Suddenly, television makes sense, doesn't it? They believe this. And in fact, okay, now I guess I'll talk a little bit about money. In fact, this is exactly what's going wrong with newspapers, with television, with everything else. They're doing mass advertising to an audience that is loosely engaged, that they assume the worst of, and it's not working all of a sudden for them. And Tech TV was too afraid to do anything different. So Tech TV went away. In 2004, Paul Allen decided he was tired of losing money. He sold it to Comcast. Comcast basically killed it. And I'm out of work once again. However, I have this insight. I know that there's an audience for this, and everywhere I go, I'm still doing radio. I went to Canada to do the TV show up there because Canadians are a little smarter than Americans, apparently. And we know this, don't we? But anyway. So, I'm meeting everywhere I go. I'm meeting people saying, what happened to Tech TV? We love Tech TV. Please bring back Tech TV. So I'm really convinced in my heart that there is an audience, that there's something here. But I can't figure out how to do it because the economics don't seem to make sense, right? You need to do it cheaply enough so that you can't do it for 50 million. You can't do it for 10 million. You can't do it for 1 million a year. So what's happened and what we're seeing and what you're aware of, obviously, over the last 10 years is that digital technology has brought the cost of this stuff down. It's democratized media. Really, I come from, and those of us who are my age, come from an era where media was a monopoly. The power of the presses, as A.J. Labeling famously said, belongs to the guy who owns the press. The only people who get a voice in mass media are people who can afford a TV station, a radio station, or a newspaper, or a book publishing firm, or a record company. Those are the people who get to talk, and they hand-pick the Dan Rathers of the world, and if Dan Rather says something they don't like, they get rid of him. Only a few people have the voice, and ultimately it's undemocratic. The voice is held by the big corporations. Digital technology has changed that. No longer do you have to be a billionaire to start a radio station, a TV station, to write a blog, to get millions of views on YouTube. Anybody can do it. Now that's really changing the landscape very, very rapidly. And for me, it was an incredible revelation. Because all of a sudden, I can do what I used to do, reach to the same audience that I used to reach. In fact, it's a better audience because it's a global audience, and do the same kind of programming I wanted to do. In fact, better because I can narrowcast. I could say, I'm going to serve the enthusiast. You know, Tech TV was like ESPN for people who hate football. It didn't make any sense. If you do ESPN, you do it for people who love football, right? If you do a tech channel, you do it for people who love tech. The problem is that's not a big enough group for them, and they're worried that advertisers won't buy it. So I went out, and we started in 2005. I did the first podcast, This Week in Tech, which was my old Tech TV buddies. We sat around, it was cheap, crappy microphones, off-the-shelf computer gear. We got bandwidth on loan from America Online. And all of a sudden, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are listening. All of a sudden, I'm bigger than Tech TV ever was for pennies. Launched another podcast. I'm now doing about 20 audio podcasts. We reach millions of people every month. We have a budget that is, because I've grown, we have 7 people now working for me full-time, 2 editors, a producer, a business manager, an office manager. We spend about, I don't know, $350,000 a year on revenue of about $1.5 million a year, and it's doubling every single year. Not the costs, in fact. The costs are pretty static. The revenue. So it's exploded. Because we are talking to the audience hasn't really exploded. We're talking to that audience, we're delivering that audience. And what's also changed is the advertisers. They suddenly woke up. You know, advertisers, thanks to Google and Facebook, advertisers have been smoking the crack of Google and Facebook. And they no longer want that shake weed that the networks are offering. They want... I'm wearing a Jerry Garcia tie in case you... Yeah, you old farts. So, what's happened is advertisers are no longer content with loosely engaged, large numbers of people who may or may not be paying any attention. It's not working for them. What they're more and more interested in is speaking to targeted audiences. Facebook's a miracle. Google and Facebook are a miracle if you think about it. They're going to transform this industry. If you think the newspapers and television are in trouble now, just wait a few years. Because Facebook and Google offer advertisers the holy grail. When you buy an ad on those platforms, you're buying an ad from somebody who is interested in buying your product. They're pre-qualified. Yeah, I can get 18 million on Seinfeld, but I have to pay for 18 million. I only want to talk to 100,000. On Facebook and Google, I get that 100,000 and no more. It's hugely valuable, and they're not going to pay these big sums anymore, these princely sums, for these audiences anymore. That model is dead. Now, what I'm doing is kind of betwixt and between. I'm really I told you I had my feet astraddle. I'm betwixt and between. Because what we're doing is really kind of old-fashioned. The ads I do on the podcasts are really kind of like Arthur Godfrey or Paul Harvey. I'm saying, we'll be back, but first, page 2. And I'm talking about a product that I use, and we're very careful to pick products we use. We don't do many ads. We do one every half hour at most. But they're always products I use. I can do a personal endorsement for. We're talking directly to the audience of our friends who are not only engaged, but trust us. The ROI is huge. So we're able to charge $70. We charge $70 CPMs. That means an ad on Twit costs roughly $7,000 or $8,000 for that ad. Tech TV, we were charging $50 for an ad. No wonder it didn't work. We were spending $100 million and delivering $50 million ads. I'm spending $350,000 delivering $7,000 ads. The math is very straightforward. However, I still don't deliver the advertiser. I deliver a niche, which is they're pretty happy with. The return on investment is good, but where we're going to move eventually and where I have to figure out where we're going to go next is advertisers more and more are going to say, well, we like that, but can you give us, we just want people who are buying our product or about to buy a competitor's, or we want somebody who's this age. They really want specifics, and Facebook and Google know that stuff. That's why they're so valuable. So we're going to have to move in that direction, and I have some thoughts about that. I want to take questions, so I'm going to just talk for a couple of minutes more, and then I can take questions. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing next, because podcasting essentially is dead. In fact, I knew podcasting was dead the day we started it. It's too darn hard. One of the advantages you have with television and newspaper is it's easy. Television, you sit down, you push a button, it's there. And podcasting is a lot, you have to, in some ways that's our strength because anybody who's listening wants to be there. But we've kind of topped out, and every podcast will tell you this, the growth has really stopped because you have to figure out where that the podcast exists, figure out how to get it on iTunes. You have to go to the iTunes store for something that's free. You have to push a subscribe button. Boy, that sounds like I'm going to be paying some money. They already got my credit card. Then you have to figure out how to get it on your portable device. Then you have to listen to it. It's just too hard. So I realized this about a year ago, and I launched a new initiative. We're streaming live 24/7. Initially, it was just me making the podcast. Well, that was the content we had. But we're slowly growing it out. We're talking to people like the New York Times to add content. We're doing more shows. We're doing news. What I want to build, and what we can build very cheaply using off-the-shelf technology, is essentially a CNN for geeks that's only on the internet. That's there whenever they want it. All they have to know is the website. That's a lot easier than going to iTunes. So we've done that. The numbers are still a fraction of the download numbers. The downloads still are how we make our money, but we're slowly growing those live view numbers. The next thing we're going to start offering, in my mind, the whole key to this, you got to have great content, and then you have to make it easy to access. So the next step for us, we got the website. We're going to announce next week, or in 2 weeks at Blog World, a partnership with a company called MediaFly that's going to put Twit on the Roku box. You know what the Roku, it's really cool. It's $99. You attach it to your TV, and now you can get all your Netflix Instant Play and your Amazon stuff. That Major League Baseball just signed a deal with them, so you can get Major League Baseball, and the fourth button will be Twit. So you press this button, and you'll have a choice. This is where we're going to beat the network. So now we're on the big screen. It's a one-button push. Yeah, you have to have a $99 box, but we're working on that. We're making deals with portable devices. You can see us now on the iPhone. You'll be able to see us on every portable device, TiVo and so forth. The idea is it's got to be one button click away. And we're going to offer something the networks don't offer, which is you can watch what's going on right now. People love live. They're really engaged with live. I think a lot of our audience is doing something on the computer. A lot of them are at home alone, as most geeks are, lonely, sad. We're their friend. You think I'm joking, but it's true. And then we're minimized there. They listen, and if something happens, if a girl shows up, they make the screen bigger, and they go, oh, and then they can minimize it again. So we're always there. But this is what I learned from radio. That's why people watch radio or listen to radio. It's comforting. So we're always there in the background. But let's say you don't want to watch what's going on live now. You'll be able to go to that Roku box. You'll see, oh, that's live. No, I'm not that interested in security. I'd like to know more about the Mac. And you're going to have the list of all the shows, and you can watch anything at any time. So it's both on demand and live. I think that puts us at a parity with every network. And it's my goal to reach those millions of geeks out there as easy as can be. We're not dumbing our content down. We're not broadening our content down. We're broadening our reach because we want to reach that specific audience, that small group, that 1 in 100, and deliver them to the advertisers and say, this is who it is. We know who they are. They really are interested in your products and what you have to offer, and it's proven very successful for us. And I think that this is the next step for us, is to make it easier and easier to get. So I'm really excited about that and where we're going. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I've been and some of the lessons, some of the failures, not all of them. And I'm very excited about the future. Now, what does this mean for online journalists? It's a great future. Journalism is a holy, I believe, really a holy calling. I mean, it is one of the most important things to to democracy, to an informed electorate, but just to a people, to a country, to the world. They need the information. They need what we're bringing them, and they want it. The platforms that we have been on, you know this or you wouldn't be here, are dying. And they're dying for very understandable reasons. But they're not dying because people don't want what they deliver. They want that information. Our job is to figure out how to get it to them, how to make it as easy as possible to get it to them. And I think that the good news is these digital technologies are here, to save our life. They are giving us better access to our audience. They're giving our audience better access to them. I didn't even talk about the fact that everything we do is highly interactive. It's a two-way conversation. That's another thing that us old-timers have to get used to. We're used to just sitting and talking and making everybody listen, as you have today. But really, the audience is talking back, and it's really important to listen to them. The strength of Twit is not me or our hosts or our platform. It's our audience. It's our community. It's the thing that sustains us, makes us grow, and they want what we have to offer. They want what you have to offer. So my final word is to build the community around you, because not only is it the most rewarding thing you'll ever do, it's really satisfying, but they're ready for us, and they need us. So now I'm going to stop talking and let you guys talk. If you have a question or something you want to know about, I can talk about that. Why I said screw you, Mike Arrington, anything. You would just ask and I'll tell you. Thank you. They told me not to move because the guy's camera doesn't pan. So this has been very hard for me because I move around a lot. How are we going to do questions? How do you want to do questions? Just if you raise your hand and we can get you a microphone and you can ask. And nobody wants to ask anything. This is something, by the way, we've got to work on. We've trained our audience to sit down and shut up. And one of the things that I'm really working hard on is training our audience to stand up and be heard. And I'll tell you what, you look at YouTube, you look at Facebook, it's no longer the case that the audience can just passively participate. Our kids know that if you want to get something out of Twitter, you got to tweet. You want to get something out of Facebook, you got to post. And so they are active participants in their content. That's scary for old-time media that used to have a monopoly. Our monopoly is gone, but it's also very invigorating and very exciting. So stand up and ask a question. Yes, sir. Oh, Mike?
Can't tell.
Hi.
Hi there. I was curious. I mean, you basically said that the old forms of media are dying, yet throughout history to date, no new form of media has actually completely killed an old form of media.
Yeah, you're right. But what's happened is changes the economy, right? So newspapers were invented to distribute display ads, and they stuck some stuff in between the display ads. As soon as the display ads don't work, which they're not, it's going to go away. So I suppose, so I can't remember, maybe it was Clay Shirky said, there'll always be books, or maybe there'll always be newspapers, but they'll be brought to you by your butler who has ironed it out carefully for you. It will be the realm of the rich person. We've seen revolutions like this before when movable type, when Gutenberg invented movable type in the 15th century. Before that, only the very rich could afford a book because it had to be handwritten by a monk. And so the Library of Alexandria had all of the knowledge of the world on scrolls. It could burn down. That was this monopoly. The printing press made it more accessible. It still was rich people, but it made it more accessible. Did it kill books? No, but it changed fundamentally what a book is. So I think that if you look really short term, yeah, TV didn't kill radio, or the movies. We still all have all that, but I don't think we're in that kind of a transition. I think we're in a much more fundamental transition. And I think what you're seeing is, will blockbuster movies go away? Probably not. But I think you're going to see far more great small films created by kids with digital cameras. This generation, this YouTube generation is going to change everything. And the way a movie will look, the way you'll participate in a movie, that's going to change. So are movies going away? Well, no, but I think the way we know it, movies are going to go away. I think the way we understand newspapers are going to go away. And I think you darn well better be looking at producing content online, because that's really where we're going to see content. Yeah, maybe you'll print it out and you'll read it at the table with the printout. I don't think so either, but yes.
Thanks. So as companies begin to expand their staffs with new publications and that kind of thing, do you think they should, when hiring, should they concentrate on experience or skill sets? And
well,
that might be kind of a confusing question, but yeah.
Well, as an experienced person, I'd say experience is very important. Well, it's really the skill set. We're in such a time of change. I do not attempt to predict stuff, because if Bill Gates couldn't predict the internet, who am I to predict what's going to happen? But I would say that it's a mix of both, because the generation that's growing up with new media has a very different take, not only on what media is, but on how to make it, how to consume it. And if you're going to reach that audience, you better be speaking their language. Experience is great. I think that there are some things that don't change, the fundamental tenets of this organization, integrity and ethics and authenticity, those things aren't going to go away. In fact, to be honest, they're being exalted. But how we deliver those is going to change greatly. So I think you really do have to have an eye towards somebody who knows this new media. I always said we won't know what the internet is until the generation that's grown up using it starts using it, starts making stuff. The printing press didn't change. The first thing they printed for the first 50 years was more Bibles. It wasn't until a generation or two that people started printing novels, that the Reformation happened. It takes a while. Now, we're in a much accelerated age, but I really think that it's my kids and your kids that are going to be the ones who use the internet to its fullest. You don't see Twitter until people have had the internet for a while. So Get some young kids in too. That's important.
My name is Ben, and I work for a daily newspaper in a major city. And I guess it seems like what you're talking about is sort of the specialization of media, that audiences are being broken up into smaller and smaller chunks where advertisers try to reach those and media outlets try to reach specific demographics. And I guess it's kind of a philosophical question, but aren't we losing something by the death of mass media? I mean, are we losing something for our democracy?
I don't think so. I think mass media we've only had mass media for 100 or 200 years, especially broadcast media, which has really become the predominant form of mass media. That is something I think alien to human experience. This idea of somebody having this bully pulpit. I don't mourn the loss of. I think there'll always be general media. Look, there's always going to be storytellers. You know, there's always going to be people who are interested in. I mean, what is a newspaper cover? You already have sections, right? You have the sports section, and you have the world section, you have the local section, and I think you already have that specialization. I think people already read what they're interested in and not what they're not interested in. And I mean, the reason you have sections is because you're trying to appeal to advertisers, but you can't compete with the way the online system works. But there'll always be a need for storytellers, for people who take facts and explain them, for people who dig up facts. You know, there's this, I'm not a journalist and I'm not trained, and those of you who are probably have talked about this a lot, but you know, there's fact gatherers and there's pundits. You know, I'm a pundit. And the bad news is that there's no money in gathering facts, but that's the hardest job of all. You reporters are really the monks of the information world. You labor in obscurity. You have to be driven by passion because you're paid nothing and you sleep on rocks. And yet we need that. And what we're seeing is the rise of the pundit, because that's easy. You know, I don't even have to worry about facts. I just make them up as I need them. But we really do need the facts. I think the internet's going to change that a little bit too. I mean, I look at Wikipedia. You know, we know as a society, we've known for hundreds of years that facts are hard. I mean, that's why we have jurisprudence. That's why we have opposing attorneys who argue opposing facts, and then we have to have a jury of 12 peers to determine the fact. It's hard to figure out facts. And I think the public is saying to us as journalists, oh, come on, you have an opinion. We know that you slant it. We place the comma there, you've slanted it. So the public no longer believes in an objective, you know, set of facts. So I think what's going to happen is facts are going to kind of, Wikipedia is a lot like the jury system, where you have Wikipedia's best work is done where it's very controversial and you have two different parties vying over the set of facts, and then an editorial layer of people who are trying to take tone and voice out of it and just narrow it down to the facts. Those articles really are the best articles on Wikipedia. I think we have kind of the tools to do that. So I think that the people who are going to be most successful in journalism are the people who can synthesize, can tell story, can explain it, and there'll be always a market for that. I mean, that's what we need as human beings. We need somebody to explain it to us, or at least tell a story that's plausible around it. Yes.
Hey, Leo, appreciate the Wikipedia mention.
This is the book, Andrew's book. Everybody should read it.
Yeah, thanks. Leo, 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago, I heard about Twitter first from your podcast. And I know that's kind of the buzz of this conference. You've actually moved beyond Twitter after being at the top of the leaderboard.
Well, Twitter moved beyond me. Maybe that's
it. So maybe you could explain to the audience how you used Twitter and then moved on from that, because I think it's an interesting story.
This is a sore spot for us, because before there was Twitter, there was Twit. I thought, this is a great name for a network, Twit. Nobody would ever use that name. And I know Ev, and actually I asked Ev, I said, what were you thinking, dude? He said, we didn't think Twitter was going to be that big. We didn't think Twit was going to be that big. We didn't think there'd be a problem. We had a trademark for Twit before they had Twitter. So, however, that didn't stop me from being a Twitter fan as soon as I saw it. Well, I take that back. I joined Twitter very early on. They were a couple of months old, and nothing was going on there, so I said, nah. But 6 months later, when a few of my friends had joined it, it was very clear that something was going on there. I think Twitter is an intermediate solution also. The things wrong with Twitter are that one company owns it, that everything on Twitter is put there by us. You know, we're sweat equity partners in Twitter, but get none of the benefit of Twitter, except perhaps as, you know, as we follow the stream. It's immensely useful. I think it's the internet nervous system. I think it's the first stirrings of the internet nervous system. You know, when I was growing up, when I learned about the Kennedy assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination by waking up and hearing it on KCBS radio. When I heard about Michael Jackson dying on Twitter. And I think this generation, that's how we learn news, is on Twitter. But really, Twitter is just, it was brilliant, but it was just the first, it's just the first iteration of what will eventually be kind of an internet nervous system that you'll be plugged into. And the zeitgeist will flow around you at all times. And I think there's better ways to do it than Twitter. And I think we participate in it as journalists. I mean, we're part of the internet nervous system. We're actually the input. We're the ones who are putting content into it, and then people stir it and churn it around. Twitter doesn't exist without the original stories. You know, what Twitter's at its best, not when you say, I had toast for breakfast, but when you say, did you read this great article? So I think all of us as journalists should really think about Twitter as the first steps in a system that will ultimately make all things knowable to all people. That's where I think we're headed, where you just kind of plugged into the zeitgeist. You already feel that way. If you really use Twitter properly, you know, if you check it regularly, you don't have any fear anymore that you're going to miss something, do you? Because you just know. If you follow the right people, I will know the stuff I care about. I'll get up in the morning and I look at Twitter and I know what happened. I know that David Letterman had an affair right away, even if I didn't see. You know, I mean, it's really amazing. But I'm not crazy about one company controlling that. That always scares me when I see that. I don't think it'll be that way forever. I'm running out of time. Quickly, more questions. I see Catherine sneaking up. Anything else you want to know? Yes, in the back. I don't know anything, by the way. I hope I don't mean to come off that way. I know nothing. I think we're figuring this out together. And it's really exciting to figure this out. And this is just kind of what, from where I stand, this is what it looks like. But no one really knows what's happening, right? I mean, I don't know. The New York Times, I could be getting a newspaper 40 years from now. I don't think so, but I could be. I mean, who knows?
Leo, you were someone that, you know, you described yourself as starting on a bridge and being a bridge between old and new media. Right. And that, when I was growing up, I watched you on screensavers, and that's why...
I hate hearing that. I hear that all the time now.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I don't mind.
But, I mean, that's the reason why I see you on Twit and I see your podcasts.
Yes.
Is because your foundation was built on old media.
In mainstream media, absolutely. Right. It's very powerful.
So what do you say to the next generation who doesn't have that foundation to jump off of?
You know, the science fiction author Theodore Sturgeon said that 80% of everything is crap. He's a very crumpy guy, and I think there's some of you who might say now it's more like 99% of everything is crap. So I often get asked, well, what, you know, there's all this stuff now, and how does stuff surface? I believe that the 1% of the great stuff will just surface. As this internet nervous system gets more developed, word of mouth becomes more efficient, and great stuff rises. That's why you see stuff go viral, because people pass it around. So yeah, you can no longer, or you can still, but soon you will no longer be able to use mainstream media as a launching pad. You know, what CNET did by to launch its website by creating television shows that made people go to the website, you can't do that anymore. You know, that opportunity's gone. The answer, I think now, is the same as it should always have been: the best content. The way to get good is by doing great stuff. Do the best stuff you can, do the stuff you care the most about, so that your passion shines through, because people love it when you're passionate. And if your passion shines through and you're doing great stuff, I believe that this new internet nervous system will surface you. So yeah, there's a lot of crappy YouTube videos, there's a lot of stupid Twitterers, you know, there's a lot of crap. There's more crap than ever before. But at the same time, there's also more great stuff than ever before. And I think that's part of our job as journalists, can surface it, and the whole world becomes journalists and surfaces it. So I think that the opportunities are there. Just do good stuff. I really believe it. I believe in a meritocracy. I think that this is a meritocracy more than it's ever been before. Before, it was a monopoly of those who had capital. It wasn't a good system. I was successful at it because I was able to cajole, wheedle, and beg my way into it, and work my way through the ranks, swallowing my pride and my true sense of what was right in order to crawl my way up. And I benefited from that. But God, I hope that nobody has to do that ever again. And I don't think you will, because I think that monopoly is being broken. And everybody has the tools now to do it. So just do great stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Leo.